Welcome to another episode of Purchase to Profits. I'm Seth Ferguson. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss our daily interviews with successful real estate investors. Our guest today is a nationally acclaimed corporate and asset protection attorney who has written a number of books for entrepreneurs and investors. He's also a rich dad advisor to Robert Kiyosaki. Garrett Sutton is the founder of Corporate Direct and Sutton Law Center. Garrett, welcome to Purchase to Profits. It's great to have you on the show.
Seth, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this because I know you can add a lot of value and give some really valuable insight to all of our viewers. And to start things off, you are a very accomplished author. You've pumped out quite a number of books.
I have. I did Loopholes of Real Estate, which is for real estate investors. And I also did Start Your Own Corporation. All our books are on audio. That's a shameless plug. Thank you for that. So it's been great working with Robert Kiyosaki and the Rich Dad Advisors. And, you know, Seth, we've gone around the world talking to people about financial education. And there's an interest in this around the world. So it's been really a joy to be involved with Robert Kiyosaki and the Rich Dad Advisors.
Absolutely. You have a great platform, and, you know, the work that you're doing has really inspired, you know, people like myself to further the message and really get the message out there that real estate is a great vehicle for that financial freedom and wealth building.
Well, they don't teach it in school, so we need people like you, Seth, to get the word out there. So thank you.
That's right. I wish the education system would change, but I don't think there's going to be any changes anytime soon.
Correct.
Yeah. So let's get right into it. Your expertise is on the structure side for real estate. So do you want just maybe for somebody getting started in real estate who doesn't understand the difference between a C Corp and an LLC, do you want to just give us the common structures we might encounter in a real estate deal?
Sure. Well, I like to phrase it as the good, the bad, and the ugly.
All right.
And so the bad way to hold title is in your individual name. If you get sued by a tenant, the properties in your name, they can reach not only the equity in the property, but all of your personal assets. And that's true with tenants in common. I mean, if you have a property with a friend as tenants in common and your friend gets sued, the person suing your friend can reach that interest and force a sale of the property. So that's not a good way. There's a lot of misinformation in the United States about land trusts. Land trusts offer no asset protection, so that's not a good way. And so there are a couple bad ways to hold title, including joint tenancy. The joint tenancy says whoever dies first, the other joint tenant gets the property. Well, I don't like sharing property with someone who has an incentive to benefit from my death. So,
yeah.
You know, I'm not going to, unless my partner's 102 years old, I'm just not going to go joint tenancy. So that's not a great way to hold title. The bad way the ugly way in the United States is a C Corp. If you hold real estate in a C Corp, there's that double taxation. You're going to pay tens of thousands of dollars more than you would if you use the good entities, which are LLCs, limited liability companies, and limited partnerships. And for Canadians, we'll talk about limited partnerships in the United States. But those are the two good ways to hold your real estate title. And it's important, Seth, that when people set up that LLC, for example, that's only half the battle. You then need to transfer title from your name into the LLC. So you have to go to the county, do a deed. You're going to use a grant deed or a warranty deed, not a quitclaim deed. And you're going to make sure that transfer goes from your individual name into the LLC. So that's kind of the basic rules for holding real estate in the United States.
Yeah. And do you want to maybe explain for somebody who's a total novice, what is a partnership or what is an LLC? Like, some people might not know what it is even.
Well, that's a good point, because they don't teach this in school, as we mentioned. Yeah. So the LLC, the corporation, the limited partnership, is an entity, a separate legal being that is created when you file with the state. So, for example, you're going to set up a Wyoming LLC. We really like the state of Wyoming. We can talk about that. When you're going to form that Wyoming LLC, you have to file with the state of Wyoming for permission to operate as an LLC. So with the sole proprietor or your individual name, you don't have to do anything. There's no requirement there to do anything. To get the protection that the LLC offers, you have to affirmatively file with the state, and then you have to follow these rules on an ongoing basis so you stay protected.
Yeah.
So that's the main thing. And then you have to file tax returns in the name of the LLC and all. I mean, you have to follow the formalities, but it's just an extra step. But the benefit of that extra step, Seth, is that you have limited liability protection. You've paid the state for a charter that gives you limited liability protection. And so that's what we encourage our clients to do. And we assist them in setting up the structure and the entities.
Yeah. And you mentioned Wyoming. People also throw around Delaware. Why does the location matter so much with these structures?
Well, I have to mention this to a Canadian. You know, we had this thing called the American Revolution, and we fought the British, and we also fought the British East India Company. You know, the revolution was against this giant corporation. And when the revolution was over, they were at the Constitutional Convention figuring out how things are going to work in this new country. And James Madison, one of our founders, wanted the corporate law to be national, to have it be the same in every single state. Well, after this experience with the British East India Company, a bunch of states said, no, we want to have our own corporate law. We want to make sure that we at the state level can control these corporations. And so that's why we have differences from state to state. Some states are really weak, like California and New York. Some states, they compete against each other to be strong, to be the best states. And those would include Wyoming, Nevada, and Delaware. And we like Wyoming because you have the best asset protection law, along with Nevada and Delaware. But your name does not appear on the state website. So you have privacy because Wyoming doesn't list your name. And the annual fee is only $50 a year. And so for Nevada and Delaware, it's $350 a year. So we have this historical basis for different state corporate laws. And we like Wyoming the best as a result of what I just mentioned.
Yeah. And you had said a partnership or an LLC are the best entities. What are some of the differences between the two? Because they're kind of similar, but kind of different at the same time.
Well, we have to distinguish between a partnership, which can be a general partnership where there's unlimited liability, and a limited partnership where you get the charter with the state. But with a limited partnership, you have to have two partners. It's a requirement that you have two partners, a general partner who's personally liable for everything, and a limited partner who's limited to the amount of money they invest. Now, we don't like to be a general partner of a limited partnership as an individual, right? We're still personally exposed to those claims. So we have to set up a corporation or an LLC to be the general partner, right? So we can encapsulate that unlimited liability into a corporation or LLC. Well, in that context, you've had to set up two entities in the limited partnership scenario, a corporation or LLC to be the general partner, and then a limited partnership to be the limited partner. And so that requires two entities. The LLC, on the other hand, the limited liability company, only requires one entity. Everybody's protected. And so when you give people the choice, most people want to use the LLC. Now, there are some circumstances, like with Canada, where if you invest in the United States, you would use a limited partnership because that matches up better with Canadian taxation. The LLC just doesn't match up well for people living in Canada. So for our Canadian clients, a lot of times we use a limited partnership.
Yeah, nobody likes paying more tax than you have to. So
that's for sure.
Yeah.
And that's why Wyoming, Nevada, and Delaware are favored, because there's no state tax in those states. So we're not putting you into a state we're going to have to pay an extra state tax. We're putting you into a state that has great laws and has no state tax.
Yeah. And somebody researching on the internet will come across the term flow through. Do you want to explain what flow through means in terms of an LLC?
Sure. Flow through taxation means that, well, let me start with the C Corp. The C Corp is taxed at the corporate level, and now the rate's 21%. You're taxed first at the corporate level. Then when you distribute money to the shareholders, they pay a tax at their individual rate as well. So you're paying tax twice on the same dollar of income. Flow through refers to the LLC, the S corporation, a limited partnership where there's no tax at the entity level. There's no tax at the LLC level. Everything flows through to the partners. And so that is a very efficient way to be taxed. And a lot of people in the United States, when they're investing in real estate, want that flow through taxation because that's going to be the most efficient way to operate tax-wise.
Yeah. And also with an LLC, it can elect to be treated like a partnership. Do you want to maybe explain what goes into that?
Well, the LLC is probably the most flexible entity we have, Seth. You can be taxed, if there's only one owner, you can be taxed as a disregarded entity. So everything flows on to your personal return. You don't lose the asset protection, but there's no LLC tax return to file. You can be taxed as a partnership, which is the flow through taxation. But you can also be taxed as an S corporation, as a C corporation. So the LLC offers great asset protection, and you can be taxed however you want, as long as you do the necessary filings. So that's, Seth, probably 95% of our clients will use LLCs just because of the great asset protection and the flexible taxation.
Yeah. So I thought it would be really interesting to go through the different scenarios. So we get lots of people watching the show who are interested in fix and flips, and some people interested in single family buy and hold, and then syndication. So let's start with buy and holds, fix and flips. What sort of entities and structures would a fix and flipper find most advantageous?
Well, for our clients, Seth, we set up LLCs, and then we'll work with the CPA, but typically you would have that LLC taxed as an S corporation. And here's the reason. With the fix and flips, that the IRS considers that a trade or business. This is not a passive holding LLC where you're flowing profits from the duplex through. This is actually an entity that you have to put you're working inside the entity. You have to pay yourself a salary there. With the S corporation, we can minimize payroll taxes. And I don't know if your Canadian listeners and viewers know this, but our social security system is going to go bankrupt. So we want to
same here.
Yeah, someday there's no money left. So we want to minimize the amount of payroll taxes we have to pay. The S corporation allows us to do that. So the IRS is going to want to see a salary somewhere. So you pay yourself a reasonable salary. You pay the payroll taxes on that, which if you own the LLC and are the employee, you're paying both halves of the payroll tax. That's 15.3%. That's a lot of money. So we want to minimize that through S Corp taxation. And that's so for fix and flips, we use an LLC taxed as an S Corp. Now, it wouldn't work for Canadians because the S Corp, if you're a U.S. citizen paying taxes in the U.S., you can be an owner of an S Corp. But if you're outside the country and not a U.S. taxpayer, you can't use an S Corp. So there's a little wrinkle there.
Yeah. And let's say, somebody was doing fix and flips and now they're growing their business. So they have, let's say 6 projects going on at any one time. How do things change for them at that point in terms of mitigating risk?
Well, that's a really good question, because if you have 6 fix and flips in one LLC and you get sued over one project, they could reach the equity in all 6 projects. So many of our clients will only do 2 or 3 properties in one LLC. And if they're fixing and flipping a number of properties, they would just use separate LLCs for the various projects.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to have 20 fix and flips in one LLC and get sued, and then all those properties are exposed to a claim. So. That's a good question.
Yeah. So moving on to maybe a residential buy and hold scenario where they're doing some smaller, duplexes, triplexes, that kind of thing. How do your clients set things up?
Well, we would have a LLC in the state where the property is located. So let's say you buy a property in Salt Lake City. So you'd have a Utah LLC on title to that property. Utah is a weak state when it comes to asset protection. So we would have the Utah LLC owned by a Wyoming LLC. The Wyoming LLC gives you great asset protection. There's no state tax. It's very affordable. And then what we do is, say you have a property in Texas. We would set up a Texas LLC for the next property in Texas. And the Texas LLC would also be owned by that same Wyoming LLC. We don't need to set up a new Wyoming every time. So a Utah LLC, a Texas LLC owned by the one Wyoming LLC, and you just grow according to that format. Now, if you have 100 properties, you may have not one Wyoming LLC. You may have a Nevada LLC and a couple Wyoming LLCs. And, we wouldn't have all 100 properties owned by the one Wyoming LLC. But, Seth, you have to look at this as a form of insurance, right? We just want to have insurance on the properties, but this asset protection, these entities are the second line of defense. It's another form of insurance against you being sued, not only by a tenant, but in a car wreck, for example, where they want to get at the properties. They have to fight through Wyoming. It's not easy to get through a Wyoming LLC. And so that's how we structure things here.
Yeah. And as investors, we work so hard to build up those portfolios. It would be unfortunate to lose everything just because we set something up the wrong way.
Well, and I tell this story all the time, but I was giving a talk in San Francisco, and a lady came up to me and said, I just bought a duplex. Should I set up an LLC? I said, absolutely. And she goes, well, what's the filing fee, the annual fee in California? And it's high. It's $800 per year. And I told her that. She goes, oh, no, I can't afford that. And, that's her choice. So she held it in her individual name. Well, the next time I came to San Francisco, she said, I talked to you the last time. I've been sued. I'd like to set up that LLC now. It's too late. She was sued when title was in her individual name. You can't all of a sudden set up an LLC and be protected for what happened in the past, which means it's really important to set these up at the start and get protected right off the bat.
Yeah. And especially now with the internet, people can go online and set things up on their own. That's certainly not the best way to do things when lots of real estate's involved.
Well, I just have so many horror stories of people who have set it up wrong. Maybe they have their LLC taxed as a C Corp. They're going to pay, hundreds of thousands more in taxes, but they just did it themselves. They didn't, get any advice. And so it's important to, get someone on your team who appreciates this. And it's not expensive. We charge $695 for an entity, and the state filing fees are on top of that. Again, it's just another form of insurance.
Yeah. And it's really a cost of doing business. That's the only way to think about it. Yeah.
Well, it's an expense too. You get to write off the cost.
Yeah.
So it's just really good. And, Canadians, you guys are so nice and pleasant, and you don't sue each other as much as we do down here. So for your Canadian listeners coming down here, the Americans, it's kind of some rough and tumble down here. People, especially in California and New York, sue all the time. And the FBI has identified a subclass of American citizen that is a professional litigant. I mean, these are people who find problems and sue over them. So you just need to take those steps to be protected.
Absolutely. And one of the ventures we didn't talk about was those larger syndicated deals. And I know lots of our viewers, they're on the verge of getting into those bigger projects where they're raising capital. How do we structure something like that to make sure everybody's looked after?
Well, typically a syndication would be either an LLC or an LP, managed by the syndicators. Who, as a syndicator, you want to have control. And then the investors are passive owners of the LLC. With an LP structure, you can be the general partner through a corporation, and you have pretty good control in that position as the general partner. And then the limiteds are limited in what they can say and do. And so a lot of syndications are through limited partnerships. And the owners, the investors, will have an interest, a membership interest in the LLC, a partnership interest in the limited partnership. And they're protected at that level. But some people would have a Wyoming LLC of their own to own their interest in the syndication. And then you only need one Wyoming LLC. So say you're part of 5 syndications, you have your 5 membership interests held by the one Wyoming LLC. So that's another layer of protection that people utilize.
Yeah. And like we mentioned before, it's important as a syndicator to know where your money is coming from, because if you're looking at Canadian funds coming into the US, you need to make sure you're structured as that partnership versus an LLC.
Right. And so if you're going to be syndicating in the United States from Canada, you probably would want to use that limited partnership structure. Because it is better for Canadian taxation.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you have any, let's say somebody's brand new, they haven't, structured anything yet, and they're listening to this. Do you have any other tips from your vast years of experience doing this for best practices and how to get started?
Well, that's a good question, Seth, because, it's a lot of people will go online and they'll set up the LLC, right? And they think, oh, I'm done. Well, you need to have all the paperwork done. You need to issue the certificates. If the IRS comes calling and you haven't issued the membership certificates, that's a big strike against you. As we mentioned, you also have to transfer title into the name of the entity. But that's not all. You have to do ongoing work. They're called corporate formalities. And on an ongoing basis, year to year, you have to pay the fee to the state. You have to do the annual minutes of the meetings, right? You have to pay your resident agent. If you don't have a good resident agent to accept service of process, notice of a lawsuit, that can be a really dramatic thing for you. So we provide resident agent services in all 50 states. And it's not expensive, but it is necessary, because if you don't have that person on board, you're not going to get notice of a lawsuit. If you don't get notice of the lawsuit, the person suing you can get a default judgment, meaning they go to court. They said, I tried to serve the owner of the building. There was no one there. And so then they publish notice in the newspaper, in the 2-point type you'll never see. And then they go back to court and say, we tried serving them. We put notice in the newspaper. They never answered. And the court says, okay, you win. So you've just lost the case for not getting notice of it. So you don't want to be in that position. These are some of the ongoing formalities. You have to file a separate tax return if you have a partnership. You have to have a separate bank account. You can't commingle your personal funds with your business funds. And so these are all important ongoing formalities. They're not hard to follow, Seth. It's just if you don't follow them, the consequences can be pretty dramatic.
Yeah. And in your opinion, what's your feeling on how things are changing now looking forward to the next 5 years? Because we just had the corporate tax rate drop down to 21%. Do you see anything else in the future that an investor should be aware of?
Well, it's kind of interesting with Delaware. They're requiring the resident agents now to know who the owners of the business are. So you have to check this database against criminal elements and all. So Delaware is the only state I know of that has done that. But obviously the federal government wants people, wants the resident agent to know who they're dealing with. And so that might spread. I don't know. But, if you're going to commit crime, it's best to use a Wyoming LLC. No, I'm kidding. But Delaware, they want to know who the people are, and who knows if that spreads.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so if somebody's looking for a lawyer or an attorney to create these, what sort of questions should somebody be asking if they're brand new and they don't know?
Well, I think you want to deal with someone who specializes in this. I mean, this is all we do is set up entities in all 50 states. So, if your brother-in-law is a personal injury attorney, but doesn't, deal in corporations and LLCs, he may not be the guy. But if he's a good brother-in-law, he'll tell you someone in town who does know how to do this. You just want to get to the right person. The other thing, Seth, I think it's important if you're going to be dealing with an attorney in town that you want to deal with an attorney who also invests in real estate, right? It's important for them not only to see the legal side, but also the business and investing side of real estate. So I think that's important as well.
Yeah, no, those are some really good tips. So if somebody's looking to learn more about what you're doing, maybe get a hold of some of your books, where can they find you?
Well, our website is corporatedirect.com. And so they can go to corporatedirect.com. We have all sorts of articles. We talk about foreign investors, Canadians who want to invest here. We also have a free 15-minute consult with a paralegal. So if you call the 800 number, at least in the US, 800-600-1760, or from the website in Canada, you can arrange for a free 15-minute consult to see if we can help you, to see if there's a fit. And then we help you structure the LLCs and corporations properly. And then our job is to make sure that you follow the formalities on an ongoing basis so you don't have the corporate veil pierced. So we'd be happy to help any of your listeners with these issues. Yeah,
it's the best money you will ever spend.
It is. I mean, you can sleep at night. There are a lot of times when your spouse doesn't want you to invest in this stuff. He or she is concerned about risk, and you want to allow them to be able to understand what you're doing and also appreciate that you're taking steps to protect the family nest egg. And that's what these LLCs and corporations can do. Now, again, insurance is the first line of defense. So when we're setting up entities, this doesn't mean you're not going to have insurance. That's the first line of defense. These entities are the second line of defense.
Yeah, no, that's so true. Well, Garrett, I just want to say thanks so much for taking the time today and sharing your knowledge. I'm sure all of our viewers learned something today from you.
Great. Well, it's a pleasure to have been with you, Seth.
Yeah, no, hey, thanks again. And to you, our viewers, I wish you well in your journey from purchase to profits. See you next time.